excited today to be speaking with Jonathan Keijser, the writer-director of Peace by Chocolate. Jonathan, thank you so much for chatting with me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you because this is an absolute joy. This film is a joy from start to finish. I was wondering, from your perspective, what made you want to tell this story? What was it that drove you and excited you about it?
Well, I'm originally from Halifax, Nova Scotia myself. And, I've been based out in Los Angeles for about a decade now. And, when Trudeau made his campaign pledge in 2015 to bring in 25,000, and which turned into 50,000 Syrian refugees by the end of the year if he was elected, I think all of Canada was really watching to see, what would happen. Like, is that your bureaucracy moves slow? Can we actually do this as a country and step up and be a world leader to bring people in? And there were so many stories that came out of this commitment when he was elected, and this was just one of them. The Hadhads were the first family to come to Antigonish, Nova Scotia. They were one of the first families to arrive in Nova Scotia, and I immediately connected with the community spirit, the helping thy neighbor, right, aspect of this story, which is, it doesn't matter where you're from. If you're from Antigonish, Nova Scotia, Damascus, Syria, we're all human beings at the core, right? We're all individuals beyond the color of our skin and our culture. We are all the same inside. And I was like, yeah, that's what the spirit of growing up in Nova Scotia was like for me. And I was like, okay, this is a story that needs to be brought around the world.
Well, you capture that, and one of the things that I thought was so interesting, you sort of talked about it there. There's this. Well, there's a. I don't know if tension is the right word, because for some people there is no tension, but this idea of neighbors and newcomers, and in the midst of that is this definition of home. When the family arrives, they say welcome home, and you just get the sense of you sense in that moment that they're saying this is not my home. It becomes their home. But I was just wondering, from your perspective and from your conversations with the family, I assume you've been talking with the family. What is that moment like? What is that moment like? What defines a home for them? And how do you accept a new place when you've been taken from your other?
One thing that has really stuck with me is something I hear from people who've been displaced, not just, from the Syrian war, which is still going on. Something we don't really think about, but these conflicts, they go on even though they don't go on in the news, right? So the civil war is still ongoing and there's still atrocities happening every day, even though we don't read about it. But, I think it doesn't matter which place you come from or which situation you come from. If you're a refugee, you don't choose to be a refugee. You don't choose to come to, the middle of nowhere in Nova Scotia in the freezing cold. When you come from a place where you have your life and your family and your home, what you've, grown up with, what you've developed to be your home. So I think it's really important to remember that it is not a choice, right? It's unfortunately a fact of life, a fact of this situation that this family was in. But I think you can choose to have a new home, right? You can choose to have a new home if you have the support of the community, if you have the support of people who are not necessarily coming from the same background. And so that, I think, is something that I think every newcomer has that fear. But what's going to happen, right? What will life be like? What is going to be next for me and my family and my dreams? And in this case, it turned out very well, right? There were a lot of people who said, no problem. You need a shed to build chocolate. Okay, we're gonna find that shed and we're gonna build it, right? And we're gonna give you the tools you need to succeed. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. And I think, that's unfortunate, but there are a lot of great stories of success beyond this one of Peace by Chocolate. There are tons of refugees I've met, people who started like sock businesses and who have done food co-ops and just amazing work that's beyond what you could imagine. And that's because of the support of the community.
Mm, yeah. Um, One of the things, I mean, you sort of mentioned it there, but one of the things that comes up with the film, I think, I forget who mentions it, but says that this is the new Canadian dream. And I was wondering, that is a fascinating like term to use in the film. And I was just wondering what that means to you, and what is that dream now from your conversations?
Well, thanks for picking up on that line. You obviously watched the film very, very well, so I appreciate that. You know what, that term is really used more on the American side, right? This American dream. But I think as Canadians, we have maybe a slightly different set of values of what it means to be Canadian. I think that is one of acceptance. Not everyone might get behind this, but I think we are a very multicultural society, right? Canada is a very new country historically, right? If you look at the length of other countries in existence, and we all come from somewhere else, right? Maybe it takes a few generations, you forget that, but we're all basically not here. I mean, obviously there's some people who are originally from the land in Canada, and we need to respect that, but most of us are not. So I think it's just, again, you got to remember we're all really, refugees and immigrants at the core of it. So
That's interesting because you're right. You don't really think about that sort of term. Some of us are newer than others. Maybe that's the way to describe it.
exactly. Some of us are newer than others. Yeah.
With that in mind, it's interesting. Now there are we focus. I forget the name of the family that takes him in, or takes them in, but they're very open and welcoming. But you still sense that at the beginning of the film, at the very least, the people of the community are well-meaning, but still don't understand what they're going through. I was wondering from your conversations with people, is there something that you've learned that people could do differently when meeting new Canadians in this context, or in any context, really, wherever it may be, but how we can help build those bridges?
I mean, it's a great question, but it's a tough thing to do. I think, first of all, don't make any assumptions about about other people. I mean, you could just say that about pretty much any situation. Doesn't matter if you're talking to a refugee or not, but just don't assume you know the narrative about someone else's life, right? Like it could be as simple as if having a really bad day and you meet somebody and you have this kind of interaction that might be unpleasant, but you don't know what's going on in someone else's life, when something, doesn't happen, you don't know what's happening, they don't know what's happening in your life, right? But in the case of displacement, you really don't know what a lot of people who have come from a war-torn country have gone through, right? If you're in Canada and you've grown up here, you have an education, if you have a roof over your head, you come from a place of privilege, right? Not having to flee your own home is a place of privilege. So we don't know what it's like to have to leave everything. I mean, I've spent so much time thinking of that, telling this story, right? What would it be like if everyone I knew, all my family, everything I built in my life, I would have to leave like that. And I couldn't even take a suitcase and I'd never come back. And so that, just never assume that also that you're immune from that too, right? Things change as we see what's going on. Things change in the world instantly. And yeah, so just be grateful that you have what you have and hopefully give some of that back to other people if you can.
What is it about chocolate? I know you've mentioned there are many other great stories, but this is a film about chocolate, and what is it that makes this such a special and unique connection with the culture and peace by chocolate as well?
I mean, as a storyteller, you're always looking for, at least for me, I'm always looking for the universality. What is something that everybody can connect with? Immigration, this idea of newcomers, refugees, it's a contentious issue, right? It's something that a lot of people disagree on, and that's great in some sense. It's great to have a conversation, have something to debate. And so as a storyteller, what better to frame that debate than chocolate, right? Because most people, unless you're allergic, can get behind liking chocolate, right? Like this is a very good common denominator. And I think that's a great part of their real business. It's a great part of this story, is that so many people, I had a woman come up to me. I was in a very conservative part of the States. I did a screening. We were the closing night film, and I was really pleased to be there, but I was a little worried. I was like, how would people receive this film? And I had a lady come up to me right afterwards, and she said, I really didn't want to see your film. Okay, thank you so much for letting me know that. But it had chocolate in the title, and I love chocolate, so I decided, your closing night, I had to come. I'll give it a chance. And she said, I've been really against the idea of having people come into our country. And, I'm always, voting Republican. This has just not been the policy that I've been, for. But after seeing your film, I think I'm going to think a little bit differently next time around. Um, and for me, like, that's why we make movies. That's why we do cinema, right? Is, if you can bring people on a journey, if you can get them hooked, and then you can give them a piece of information that maybe they didn't know before. Maybe they saw, hey, look, these guys are just regular people. That's it, and they make chocolate. There's nothing crazy or dangerous about them, right? And that's worked. And it's not just her. It's been a lot of people who have come up to me since. We've played almost 40 film festivals around the world, been in theaters in 85 plus theaters in North America. And I think that's the power of chocolate. That is exactly why.
Mm. I absolutely. I mean, it is such a great connector. Like you said, this universality across the board. For just asking you personally, I'm just wondering what you learned from anything about, or if there's anything in particular that you learned in the development of the film about the experiences.
Well, it's tough. I'm obviously the Canadian portion of this story. I know the Nova Scotian spirit and the community and the importance of, the values that we all Canadians can be proud of. And I brought that to the story. I did not know the Middle Eastern experience. I did not know the refugee experience. I still don't think I know that. I have a good idea. I've spent enough time in that space, but having the privilege to learn about that and hear people's stories, I mean, that's been a very impactful thing. It changes your life, to be able to work with people from a different culture and have different perspectives. On set, we had three languages. We had a completely Quebecois crew. I had my English component around me, and then we had Arabic. So we had three languages. Not one of us spoke the same language. So we were all basically using Google Translate. I don't know what we'd do without Google Translate. It was an app that was always out on set. But I think the process of making the film was demonstrating the idea behind the story, which is we are all human beings. We all can get along, especially when we have a shared goal. In our case, it was making a film. Everybody on set knew we were here to make a film. And it didn't really matter, and an important film and an important story. And it didn't really matter if we didn't really know the language to communicate. Like, we still figured out where to be and figured out what to do. A couple times we had a few miscommunications, but for the most part, knew why we were there. And that's the great thing about art, is that language in the end doesn't really matter that much, right? And I know, for my Arab cast, it was all their very first North American production, right? The woman who plays the sister, she'd been in Canada for literally months. She just had a baby right beforehand, and she was like, I'm coming on set. I really want to do this. They were there 100%. And the whole Francophone crew was just so pleased to be working on something, with people who were different, who had a different life experience that we could connect with. And we would all get together afterwards and have lunch together and share food and stories and experiences. And I don't know, that for me, that's the paycheck, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, as we start to wrap up here, Jonathan, I was just wondering too, what the family has the family seen the film and what their response has been.
Yeah, so the family was very much part of the story from the beginning. When I initially approached them, I have a documentary background. I thought, maybe we make a documentary. I love docs that happen in real time with the creator, right, with the filmmakers there as things unfold. A lot had already happened, so we kind of discussed this idea of based on a true story, and we thought, what a great way to be able to tell so many other people's stories beyond the family story, through the lens of what happened in Nova Scotia. So, we worked very closely to get a much emotional truth we could in the film. And, there's actually a scene in the film when they open a new factory. They're all there. The whole family's behind the cast. They're extras, So you can freeze frame and you'll see, actor Tareq, real Tareq, actor Issam, real Issam. And it was just, the Arab actors, Yara Sabri, Hayem Ali, Najla, they're all really well known in the Middle East. So Tareq and his family had grown up watching films made by Hayem Ali,
Wow.
acted by Yara Sabri. So when we said, hey, these are going to be this is going to be your dad and this is going to be your mom, they were like, oh my God, it's like you saying like, okay, Tom Cruise and, are going to be your parents. And so they were like, we have to be on set and meet them. And so just getting that experience to have the family be part of the process and also have people that they really looked up to, like play themselves was great. And I think, they've really embraced the film. Tareq has been with me on like countless different interviews and screenings. He's seen it more than anybody else. So,
Oh, that's exciting. It is an absolutely wonderful film. I just from start to finish, I just thought it was just a joy.
oh,
Um,
thank you.
and thank you for the time, and I wish you the best with it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you having me.
Anytime. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks.